Have you ever wondered how close you might be to crossing the line into your own moral abyss? That moment when your model behavior could suddenly give way to a darker, more disturbing side lurking beneath the surface of society. Picture this. You're sitting at your desk, trapped in the monotony of everyday life, when suddenly you're faced with a situation where the usual rules of decency no longer seem to apply. In that moment, would you still be the virtuous person you believe you are, or would you slip into the abyss, desperately fighting as you tumble toward an inevitable fall? The unsettling truth is that you may be closer than you realize to becoming the very thing you fear. Recently, I came across a book that shook me to my core, The Lucifer Effect by Philip Zimbardo. This book doesn't just ask why good people turn bad. It offers an uncomfortable, almost brutal answer. Evil may be much closer to you than you'd like to imagine. Yes, you. Before panic takes hold, let me guide you through this shadowy maze of human psychology. Buckle up. The journey will be intense. Let's start by challenging the image you have of yourself. Chances are you see yourself as a good person. Maybe you've returned a lost wallet to its owner, or you volunteer your time at an animal shelter. But let's be honest for a moment. Have you never given in to a small temptation just because you knew no one would notice? Have you ever taken a pen from the office? Used your neighbor's Wi-Fi without asking? These aren't random questions. Zimbardo, with startling clarity, shows us that evil isn't some distant, incomprehensible force. It often begins in subtle ways, with small, seemingly harmless transgressions that gradually nudge us down a dangerous path. Take the case of Ivan Chip Frederick. You've probably never heard his name, but his story deserves to be told. Frederick was a typical American, grew up playing baseball, loved his mom's apple pie, and yet he ended up at Abu Ghraib, the infamous prison in Iraq, where unimaginable acts of cruelty were committed against detainees. Here's the shocking part. Before being sent there, Frederick was just an ordinary man. No history of violence, no monster lurking inside. Average intelligence, mentally stable, deeply patriotic. And yet, the environment of Abu Ghraib transformed him into something he never dreamed he could become. The reality is this. The line between good and evil is far thinner than most of us want to admit. Maybe you still cling to the comforting belief that you're fundamentally a good person. You tell yourself that your character is as fixed and unchanging as the stars in the sky. But let me shatter that illusion. The idea that your essence never changes, no matter the circumstances, is pure fiction. Philip Zimbardo introduces what he calls the situational perspective, an idea that is both liberating and terrifying. Your identity isn't carved in stone. It's written in sand, constantly being reshaped by the environment around you. Think about it. Do you behave the same way when you're hanging out with friends as when you're interacting with a child? Of course not. Now let's go even further. Imagine you're part of the infamous Milgram experiment, one of the most disturbing studies on human behavior. You're assigned the role of teacher. Your job: deliver electric shocks of increasing intensity to a learner every time they make a mistake. The shocks start small, but soon they reach levels that could be fatal, up to 450 volts. The learner screams, begs you to stop, but you keep going. Why? Because a man in a lab coat calmly insists that you continue. Here's the terrifying part. 65% of participants, ordinary people just like you, went all the way to the maximum voltage. They weren't sadists. They weren't psychopaths. They were normal individuals, shaped by the pressure of the situation and their obedience to authority. Zimbardo's warning is crystal clear. Under the right circumstances, or the wrong ones, anyone can be transformed into an agent of cruelty. And he didn't stop at theory. He tested this idea himself with one of the most controversial experiments in psychology, the Stanford Prison Experiment. Picture it. 24 college students, all healthy, middle class, with no history of psychological problems. They were placed in a simulated prison. Half became guards, the other half prisoners. The guards were given uniforms, batons, and dark sunglasses that hid their eyes. The prisoners were stripped, disinfected, and identified only by numbers, losing their names and their identities. What began as a simple simulation quickly spiraled into a real psychological nightmare. Guards, ordinary young men, started abusing their power. They forced prisoners to urinate in buckets, stripped naked, even locked them inside small closets as punishment. One guard, nicknamed John Wayne, became notorious for his cruelty. And here's the shocking detail. This all happened in just 6 days. 6 days before Zimbardo had to shut the experiment down. The lesson? Under the right conditions, human morality can crumble faster than a sandcastle in the middle of a hurricane. You might think, I'd never act that way, I'd be different. But can you really be sure? What makes some people, like the guards in Stanford, succumb to chaos, while others manage to hold on to their sanity? Zimbardo suggests that one of the most dangerous ingredients in this equation is obedience to authority. Whether it's a person, an institution, or a set of rules, authority can drive even the most ethical individuals to commit atrocities. Let's return to Milgram's experiment for a moment. The participants weren't malicious people. They were simply following orders, convinced that they were helping a greater cause, advancing science, improving memory. And this tendency toward blind obedience didn't start with Milgram, nor did it end there. Think of Jonestown. Jim Jones, a charismatic preacher, began with utopian ideals but slowly became a tyrant. His followers didn't notice the transformation, or maybe they ignored it. They trusted him. They obeyed him. Until the day he ordered them to drink cyanide-laced Kool-Aid. Over 900 people died that day, not because they were evil, but because they were obedient. So let me ask you, how many times have you followed an order, not because you truly believed it was the right choice, but simply because it was the easiest path? How often do you challenge authority around you, or do you just assume they know best? It may be time to start asking yourself these uncomfortable questions before you find yourself sinking into a moral swamp. But authority isn't the only culprit here. The path toward evil has another silent accomplice: the loss of personal responsibility. Picture yourself back in the Milgram experiment. Your hand hovers over the button, ready to increase the voltage. The learner screams in the next room. But you reassure yourself, it's fine. The guy in the lab coat said he's responsible. If something goes wrong, it's on him, not me. This phenomenon, called de-individuation, is incredibly dangerous. It's the same mechanism that drives people in mobs to wear masks, soldiers to wear uniforms, and online bullies to hide behind anonymous profiles. When you believe your actions can't be traced back to you, it becomes frighteningly easy to silence your moral brakes. Zimbardo ran a striking experiment to show just how powerful anonymity can be. He left an abandoned car in the Bronx, a place where anonymity often reigns. Within hours, the car was stripped and destroyed. Then, he left an identical car in Palo Alto, a tight-knit community where people knew one another. There, the car remained untouched, as if invisible. The lesson? When anonymity enters the picture and personal responsibility fades, evil finds fertile ground to grow. Think about it. How many of you, hidden safely behind your screens, have said or done something online you'd never do face-to-face? It's easy to hide, easy to become someone else. But is that shadow version of yourself really someone you'd want to confront in the mirror? And then comes the next devastating factor: the collapse of empathy through dehumanization. How do you convince someone to commit atrocities against another human being The answer is terrifyingly simple. Convince them the other person isn't human at all. This psychological trick has justified some of the worst horrors in history. Zimbardo cites a chilling study conducted by Albert Bandura at Stanford. Students were assigned to oversee and punish another group based on their decisions. But there was a twist. Before the punishment began, the victims were described in different ways. One group was labeled as animals and savages, while another was described as thoughtful and kind. The result? Those dehumanized with negative labels received far harsher punishments than those described in sympathetic terms. The same distorted logic fueled the Nanking Massacre, where Japanese soldiers, after dehumanizing Chinese civilians, unleashed unprecedented brutality. You might want to believe that dehumanization is a relic of the past, or that it only exists in the minds of the truly wicked. But look around. How often do you still hear people being called animals, scum, or vermin? Once those labels stick, it becomes disturbingly easy to dismiss another person's suffering, or even justify cruelty. Here's the terrifying truth. The moment you stop seeing someone as fully human is the exact moment you open the door to your own dark side. As the saying goes, words can be as dangerous as weapons. When used cleverly, they can disguise even the most atrocious actions. This is where euphemistic language comes in, a polished vocabulary that transforms torture into enhanced interrogation, or genocide into ethnic cleansing. It's like sweeping blood under the rug. Zimbardo shows how softened language and powerful ideologies create narratives that mask evil, allowing perpetrators to sleep peacefully at night. Take Milgram's experiment again. Participants were led to believe they were contributing to science, helping to improve memory, when in reality they were inflicting pain on another human being. Fast forward to more recent history. During the Iraq War, the torture at Abu Ghraib wasn't presented as atrocity, but as a necessary action in the fight against terrorism, a lesser evil in the name of national security. Soldiers immersed in that narrative believed they were doing good, even as they carried out acts condemned worldwide. It's a sobering reminder, when narratives are manipulated and language is softened, cruelty can be rationalized, justified, even celebrated. The next time you hear polished rhetoric making something brutal sound noble, stop and ask yourself, what's really happening behind those words? But here's the important part. Zimbardo's journey through the darkest corners of the human mind doesn't end in despair. He shows us that even when chaos surrounds you, you still have the power to choose. Just because you're standing at the edge of an abyss doesn't mean you're destined to fall. Yes, the potential for evil exists within each of us, but so does the potential for heroism. So what does it take to resist the pull of darkness and stand firm against the forces trying to drag you down? The key lies in personal responsibility. It's about taking ownership of your actions, even when anonymity tempts you or when following authority would be easier. Remember, in Milgram's experiment, not everyone went all the way. Some participants, despite the overwhelming pressure, chose to stop. Not because they were better people, but because they made the conscious decision to take responsibility even when no one else would. This is the real lesson. The power to resist evil isn't something you're born with. It's a choice you make every single moment. But here's the challenge. To resist evil, you have to stay constantly alert. It takes courage to stand up when it's uncomfortable, especially when everyone else around you stays seated. That vigilance is what separates a potential hero from a possible monster. So how do you resist the pull of authority when it pushes you toward dark paths? The answer may sound simple, but living it is hard. Question authority. Yes, question everything. Just because someone wears a uniform, has a title, or speaks with confidence doesn't make them infallible. Zimbardo's studies show over and over that when authority goes unchecked, ordinary people can be turned into agents of evil. It's easy to fall into the trap of thinking those in power always know what's best or act with good intentions. But history is filled with tragedies born from blind obedience, from the unfortunate submission in Milgram's experiment to the horror of Jonestown. The lesson is clear. When authority isn't challenged, it can become a dangerous guide. But you're not powerless. Inside you, there's a voice that can say no. That inner strength can make you step back and resist. Sometimes that single act of defiance is what prevents a plunge into the moral abyss. So the next time someone tells you to do something that goes against your conscience, stop, reflect, question. That moment of hesitation may be the turning point between being just another follower or becoming a hero. And speaking of heroes, let's not forget that amid all this talk of evil, there's another side just as important. The people who, in times of crisis, choose courage while everyone else is paralyzed by fear. Zimbardo reminds us that there is always a way forward, a path toward goodness, and it begins with action. What makes a hero different from everyone else? It's not superhuman strength or unshakable confidence. It's simply the willingness to act when everyone else is frozen. Take the example of Wesley Autry, known as the subway hero of New York. When a man suffering a seizure fell onto the tracks, Autry didn't wait for others to move. He jumped in, pressed the man down into the trench between the rails, and shielded him as the train roared overhead. While the crowd stood in shock, paralyzed by fear, Autry risked his life to save a stranger. That's real heroism, not grand battles or epic feats, but small, decisive actions in critical moments of everyday life. It's about putting someone else's well-being above your own, doing what's right even when it's terrifying. And Zimbardo's message is clear. Heroism is within reach of every ordinary person. It's a choice you can make every single day. This brings us to an uncomfortable truth Zimbardo wants us to face. Every single one of us carries within ourselves the potential for both good and evil. We are contradictory beings, capable of acts of extraordinary courage, but also of shocking cruelty. And here's the key. The choice between these two extremes doesn't happen just once in a lifetime. It's an ongoing battle, a daily struggle. Today, you might be the hero. Tomorrow, under the right circumstances, you could become the villain. The critical step is being aware of this duality. Zimbardo urges us to recognize that evil isn't only out there, embodied in monstrous figures from history or distant strangers. No, it exists inside each of us. But this realization shouldn't lead to despair. Instead, it should be a wake-up call. By acknowledging the duality within, you prepare yourself to steer your actions and make decisions that reflect your best self. This awareness makes you not only a more honest and integral person, it also makes you more deliberate, capable of acting with purpose, rather than being blindly swept along by circumstances. In the end, the point isn't to live in fear of who you might become. The point is to choose, every day, who you want to be. As we move toward the conclusion of this reflection, it's essential to understand that the line between good and evil isn't just some abstract philosophical idea. It's something that cuts through our everyday lives. Zimbardo's work makes it painfully clear that line is not fixed. It shifts, it blurs, and it depends on the choices we make and the situations we find ourselves in. Here's the most important insight. When you recognize this truth, you gain a kind of power most people ignore. You're no longer just another face in the crowd, blindly following orders or yielding to pressure. Awareness gives you responsibility. Knowing the forces that can lead to evil places you in a position of strength, the power to resist, to act, to become the main character of your own story. And this isn't just a lofty philosophical idea. It's a demand of the world we live in, a world where morality is constantly challenged, where social forces and authority figures may try to push you toward the abyss. Being aware of these forces gives you the tools to resist. So the question is, are you ready to choose the light even when the darkness seems easier? Are you ready to act when everyone else hesitates? Because in the end, it's not just about avoiding evil. It's about actively choosing good. Let's bring it all together. The Lucifer Effect isn't just a book about the darker sides of human nature. It's a call to action, an invitation for each of us to face the potential for evil within ourselves and make the conscious decision to choose good. The situations you face in life will test your morality, pushing you to that blurry frontier where right and wrong begin to mix. And it's in those moments of trial that your true character is revealed. Remember the lessons we've explored. Blind obedience to authority, surrendering personal responsibility, dehumanizing others, the seductive power of euphemistic words. All of these can quietly drag you down a dark path. But never forget, inside you also lies the power to resist, to question, to stand firm, and to act with courage, even when everything seems to be pushing against you. You don't need superpowers to be a hero. All it takes is the bravery to act, to choose the path of light, over and over again, every single day. And it's that daily choice, that persistence, that makes all the difference. So as we reach the end of this journey into the darkest corners of the human mind, guided by Zimbardo's insights, let me leave you with this. The battle between good and evil isn't decided by one grand event. It's written in the countless small decisions you make every moment of your life. Every time you defend what's right, resist the pressure of the majority, question authority, or simply choose to see the humanity in others, you are pushing back against the forces that would turn you into something you are not. It won't always be easy. It won't always be obvious, but it is essential, because in the end, your story will not be written by the situations you found yourself in, but by the choices you made in response. So make the right choice. Be the hero, not the monster. And when you reach that inevitable moral crossroads, and we all will, take a deep breath, look inside yourself, and remember the lessons we've uncovered today.